So now I have a friend, he's a coach, and this was a brilliant maneuver. He had a client that said, I'm a bad person and I can't be happy. So that was the equation in her mind, is I'm a bad person and so I can't be happy. And he says, well, hang on, you are a bad person, but there's lots of bad people that are happy. And the reason he did that is because she wasn't responding to any positive affirmations. And she said, oh, you're right. I can be a bad person and do good things. And that's what she walked out of the session believing. So I'm a bad person and I can do good things. And that was the first step in her healing. So sometimes it's not like a major change in the belief. It's just a little nudge. And what little nudge can open up some space around a belief that allows you to then start to change the way that you act.
And, you know, what would be really interesting is she might be a bad person who can be happy and do good things. How long does it take for that individual to finally say, wait a second, I'm engaging in productive, good activities.
Right.
Maybe I'm actually a good person. Sometimes we need to work in the reverse. And embrace that maybe you are worthless, but you're worthless. You're super good.
There really, if we go back to the first question that we were talking about today, there are not good and bad people in the world, or people are not fundamentally good or fundamentally evil. People are both good and evil all at the same time.
Right.
Right? Maybe even in the same breath.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe someone who's doing a good action wreaks massive havoc. And maybe someone who tries to do evil ends up creating massive amounts of good. Now, it doesn't always work out that way, and obviously there are evil people that, you know, create massive havoc in the world. But is the person who does some evil act, is he necessarily evil, or was he just evil in that moment? And so open up some space for yourself then to begin to choose exactly who you will be and how you will act now. Yeah, because even if you acted badly 5 minutes ago, you can make a new decision about now, today.
Bam, right this second. You don't have to wait. Yeah.
That's right.
You know, I can't pronounce this name. It's Emile Chartier. Chartier. Okay, see, I'm not a polyglot.
Well, I don't speak French.
Okay, well, maybe it's not French. Maybe it's, I don't know, Greenland or something.
Yeah, it could be.
But, you know, he talks about how nothing is more dangerous than an idea when it is the only one you have.
That's a great quote.
When you only have one idea, that's what you're going to be operating off of.
Mm-hmm.
And Albert Einstein, of course, he's attributed to a lot of brilliant ideas. And but one of the things that he argued is that our theories, the theories that we have, the theories that we've taught, the ones that we've adopted, they determine what we observe. So if you're a religious individual and you see a burst of light in the sky, that might be interpreted as a sign from God, a spiritual manifestation. If you're an astrophysicist, you might look at that as, you know, a comet, right? I mean, if that's your theory, if that's your theoretical framework, then that's going to influence and determine what you observe. And I have this note here. Earlier when you were talking, I knew that I had this written down somewhere. It reads like this: we're born gullible to our parents, influenceable, teachable in the first place. Therefore, we stupidly listen to our parents. But then we invent many musts, shoulds, oughts, demands, commands, in addition to the standards, the values we adopt from our parents. The standards don't upset us. We mainly upset ourselves with those Jehovian commands. So the whole point, and I'd like to think that I'm the original, I'm the author of it, but probably not. It's way too profound. But the whole idea is that, you know, we do come into this world, we're influenceable, We can be taught certain ideas, and until you decide to poke a belief, until you decide to challenge an idea, that's going to be the doctrine. That one idea that Emile Chartier had talked about, and that Einstein had argued, that we're only going to observe according to our theoretical framework. And so when I butt up against something that I feel super strong about, you know, like it has to be this way, or I cannot do that, I go and I say, why? Where does this incredibly intense thought and feeling come from? Where does this value, where does this belief come from? And so I'll poke it and I'll poke it and I'll jab it and I'll scrape at it and I'll pull its hair or whatever. And sometimes I will literally just dismantle that belief, that idea. And you know, I mean, I love my mother, I love my grandparents, I love, you know, the faith that I belong to, but sometimes when I pull it apart, I come to realize, you know what? This was somebody else's idea. This is not an eternal truth. This is that individual's teaching. This is that individual's idea. Sometimes, as I'm trying to chisel away at it, it's rock solid. It is a sound value, or it's a solid belief. And but the only way
sometimes it just seems that way too.
What's that?
Sometimes it just seems that way too. No, I'm serious. It's like in the moment it seems like some impenetrable fact. In fact, I can say that most of the time, not all the time, most of the time, the more impenetrable it seems, the more that is a sign that it's a belief. If you're saying this is the way it is, and there's no compromise, that is almost a sure sign that you're dealing with a belief. And it's okay. It may be a very useful belief that serves you, but if it's not, would you really want to live your whole life with a pretend granite wall?
No, and you know, that's a really interesting point, and I appreciate you challenging me on that, because I would say you are mostly right, but if I said you are 100% right, then it's probably not 100% right.
Nothing is, well, I mean, you know, one of the interesting things I think that comes to us from science, and I am not a scientist, but I do enjoy.
Sure. Maybe you don't have a PhD.
I'm not. Yeah, I mean, meaning I haven't dedicated my life to the scientific method. But if you look at physics, look at Isaac Newton.
Mm-hmm.
And before the Newtonian worldview came about, it was the Aristotelian worldview.
Yep.
Right? And with Aristotle, it's like if you dropped a bowling ball and a very lightweight rock next to each other, the bowling ball or the heavy object would drop faster.
Mm-hmm.
That was heavy things dropped faster, light things dropped slower. That was Aristotle. There were 4 elements according to, or 5 or whatever, according to Aristotle. Earth, air, water, and fire. It's like 4 major elements. And the Aristotelian worldview ruled science for thousands of years, and it was useful in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And then along comes Isaac Newton, and Isaac Newton turns over the apple cart, so to speak.
Yep.
Yeah, he did. And now, all of a sudden, Newton, for hundreds of years, is governing thought. In fact, most of our thought still today is ruled by Newtonian-type thinking, cause and effect type thinking.
Yep.
Not to say that that's necessarily bad or wrong or evil. It is a useful description of how things come. In the 1800s, some of the scientific journals actually published, "We have discovered everything that there is to discover about physics." They were predicting an end to publishing new discovery.
Wow.
Why? Because they were squarely inside of this Newton-type worldview, and then along comes a patent clerk in the early 1900s, Einstein.
Crazy.
And Einstein turns over another apple cart.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, you know what? Newton was pretty good, but he was wrong in these areas. And so then along...
It was almost heresy. It was almost heresy.
Sure.
You know, I mean, within the field, it was considered blasphemous. Don't you dare challenge Newtonian law.
Right.
And now we're almost in an era of don't challenge
Einstein.
Well,
actually, then along comes quantum physics. And quantum physics was contemporary with Einstein. In fact, Einstein helped push that field along largely through his debate, but he also actually came up with some of the basic science that helped push it along. And so along comes quantum physics in the lifetime of Einstein. And quantum physics then turned some of Einstein's theories upside down and said, well, Einstein is right in these areas, but it doesn't seem to describe this over here. And so now we have, within a generation, we have the laws of physics being redescribed. Well, does that mean that Newton was bad? No, it just means he was useful. Does it mean that Aristotle was bad? No, Aristotle was useful for a long time. Aristotle may have been more accurate, more full, more rich description than what was available before him. And just as Newton was a more accurate, more full, more rich description of what was before him, as was Einstein, as is, quantum mechanics. And there will be a day when most of what we're describing, we have a more accurate way to describe, because there's still things that we can't explain. And so if you look at that in the context of your own personal beliefs, maybe what you believed about yourself needed to be true for a certain reason, or for a certain period of time that kept you safe, or it kept you protected, or it helped you function within a family system. But now that family system is gone. Now you're out of school. Now your life situation has changed, and you've had all this time to learn new things. Just like science is always learning new things. And it's time to update those old beliefs. It's time to let yourself see new things and interact with the world in new ways. And what then becomes possible for you? And I might argue that for you, anything is possible. That you can change the way you want to, and you can choose to make new decisions. And you can do that by looking at them in a different way. You can also do that, and I'm not going to talk about this long, and I know you want to say something here, Christian, so I'll turn this over to you. But you can challenge the memory through reframing. You can also challenge the thought through reframing, but you can also challenge the emotion. There are ways of processing and releasing emotions. And as you learn how to process and release negative emotions, it takes the sting out of the old belief. And all of a sudden, something that felt very true has no energy on it anymore. That granite wall turns out to have been an invisible bubble that pops as soon as you touch it.
Yeah. And then as a result, you are now free from that limiting belief, or that restrictive belief, to be able to pursue your dreams, your desires, your ultimate goals. And so in my office, I'm pointing right now. I have a whiteboard, a dry erase board. And one of the things that I'll do is I'll draw a mountain, a large mountain. I mean, at least I tell them it's a large mountain. So they think it's a large mountain. Really, it's a small mountain because it fits within my office. And it's not even a real mountain because it's just drawn on my dry erase board. But anyway, so I draw this mountain, and I put this little dot at the bottom, and I'll say, that's you. Okay, you're down at the base of this mountain, and are you there? Are you there? Yes, I'm seeing it, and the sky is perfectly blue, and it's a wonderful experience. And we go through this whole, guided imagery process, and I say, okay, your goal is to get to the top of the mountain. And then what I'll do is I'll take my marker and I'll draw this long, windy path all the way to the top. And then I'll ask them, okay, now come to the board, and I want you to get to the top of the mountain. And then they'll trace that pathway. And I'll say, well, yep, you got to the top. Now, how did you get to the top? Well, following this path. And I'll say, okay, well, that's good. Now I'm going to remove that as an option. You cannot follow this path. How else can you get there? And they'll be like, well, I guess I can go off the beaten path. And I'm like, all right, so get to the top of the mountain. And they'll, do this little squiggly line that's off of the path, and they'll get to the top of the mountain. I'm like, well, that must have been quite the adventure, and hopefully you made it through safely. Now, how else can you get to the top? I'm like, what are you talking about? How else can you get to the top of the mountain? And they're looking at this like there is a set way to get to the top of the mountain. And then I'll just, usually because this is where they get stuck. They find themselves stuck by these limiting beliefs. There is only a certain way that you can get to the top of the mountain. So then I'll draw a helicopter. And I'll be like, there you go. Now you're going to be dropped off by the helicopter. Now you've gotten to the top of the mountain by climbing in a helicopter and being taken up. Now, how else can you get to the helicopter? And then they'll come in and they'll draw a hot air balloon. And then some will be parachuting in. And this was around, one of my favorites is, a while ago there was a guy who jumped out of, I don't remember, it was like the highest skydive, and he was wearing this awesome suit, and he, diving, I'm just picturing the silver or white outfit, and he's just, and, so we start creating all of these different ways of getting to the top of the mountain. And then I'll say, okay, well, you know what? It's not unrealistic for you to think of getting to the top of the mountain using a helicopter. The hardest part was getting through that limiting belief. Now you can get to the top of the mountain either by parachuting or getting in a helicopter. Now what do you need to do to get to a helicopter? And once you have the helicopter, now you're able to get to the top of the mountain. And so that's just one of the exercises that we do.
If you zoom in far enough on anything, most of what's there is empty space. And that solid granite wall, when it comes down to it, is mostly empty space. When you change the way you look at things, when you change the way you believe, your actions will change. And so we're going to challenge you to do this. Spend some time journaling, or spend some time in reflective thought if you don't want to journal. And write down one of the areas where you're struggling the most right now, where you're most needing improvement. Maybe that's in your emotions, maybe it's in your finances, maybe it's in your health, maybe it's with the food you're wanting to eat. And start to write down some of the rules that you've created around that topic. What are some of the given assumptions that you've got there? If it's in relationships, and if I'm a man and I'm in a relationship with a woman, I might write down this. I might start off the sentence, "Women are," and then I might start off, "Women are not." And if I'm struggling, I bet I'm going to come, and then I want to try to challenge myself to write down like 15 or 20 things. And I'm going to go blank for a while, like, man, I can only think of 3 things. But like, just push yourself, keep on writing. Or relationships are, or relationships are not. Mm-hmm. And just push yourself to write. And write down till you get 15 or 20 things. And then once you do that, look down the list and ask yourself this question: is there one thing on that list that might be holding me back? Mm-hmm. Now, if you have courage, and this is not only about relationship things, but if you have courage and if you have good enough rapport with your partner, get a second set of eyes on the list. Now, you might not want to do that, especially if there's something negative about them on the list, so be careful, right? Right. Use your judgment there, but if if they're open and you've talked about it beforehand and they're not judging and they're just wanting to help you, have them take a look at that list and have them put an asterisk next to the things that might be holding you back, or even add a couple of things onto your list. My wife and I recently did this. We were at a money seminar, and the leader was talking about limiting beliefs around money. And he said, your spouse probably has a better idea about what your limiting beliefs are around money than you do. And he says, if you're brave enough, and if there's a good enough relationship between the two of you, then go ahead and ask them. And this was a room filled with married couples. I think 100% of the room is couples. So I went to Andrea and I said, what are some of my beliefs around money? And then I said, I give you permission to write down as many as you can. She gave me back a list of like 20 items.
Wow.
And I looked at them, and on a few of them I was like, well, not so much. But there were a couple of them I was like, ooh, ouch. Ooh, ouch. That hurts a little bit, right? And she wasn't trying to hurt me. I had permission, so I was fine. So after I cried and picked myself up off the floor, no, that wasn't that bad. After I looked at it, I said, ooh, there are a few things on here I've got to change.
Sure.
And then how do you change? You change by changing the meaning or changing the emotion. And then there's some other programming tools or mental imagery tools that you can use that I think really speed things up, that largely use repetition and emotional intensity, positive emotional intensity. But look at any area of your life. It doesn't have to be money. It could be money. It could be spirituality. It could be your own relationship with the divine. Are there beliefs there that are holding you back? You might, if that part of your life isn't working, you might want to write down some beliefs and say, I believe that God is, or I believe that God is not, or I believe that churches are not, or I believe that, all spiritual leaders are, they are not. And just start writing things down. Now, I'm not telling you to do that if that's not the area you want to work on, but it'd be interesting. Once you get about 15 or 20 things written out, start looking at these things and asking yourself, is this serving me? Is this useful? And if it's not, you might want to ask yourself, what else could this mean? And then you might want to start to explore some of the memories that you have that helped you form that decision and see if you can release some of the emotional intensity around them. So that's my challenge. My challenge to you is to spend some time analyzing, evaluating the area of your life that is not going so well, and to write out those statements, write out those generalizations, and if you're brave enough, go to someone who's very close to you, a close friend, a partner, a spouse, a sibling, a parent, and ask them, do you think there's anything in my beliefs around relationships that are holding me back? Do you think there's any beliefs around my spirituality that are holding me back? Go to your spiritual leader and ask. And I bet something comes back, and when it does, here's my next challenge. Now you've caught the tiger. Now it's time to make tiger stew.
Yeah.
Now it's time to change things. And I'm giving you permission to change because you can.
And be honest. Be honest with yourself, because the level and the quality depends, or is not dependent, but is closely related to the honesty and the clarity of these statements.
Yeah.
Unfiltered, uncut, raw, and those might be the ones that you don't necessarily share, but be honest with yourself. If you want a more accurate outcome, that's my challenge. That's my invitation to you.
It's to be real.
Is to be real, to be honest. In the assessments, in the evaluations that I issued to people, when they get results back and they're like, this does not describe me at all, I ask them, were you honest? And they'll say no.
Right.
And then I'll have them go back and do it again. And when they're honest this time around, they get the results and they say, this describes me. So you got to write down that list, those list of beliefs, and you might not necessarily start with the beliefs. You might have to look at a behavior and say, here's a behavior. What is the belief behind it? Here is a
Right.
behavior. Why do I value this? What is the value that I have that contributes to this behavior? Or here's a value, and here, how does this influence my daily actions? And in being honest and writing them down, and then when you have the courage and the trust of others, including them in this process, you are going to, this is our bold promise to you. You will find not only freedom, but you will find that you are on the road to a better you. You will find that you are not only on the road, but you are already at the destination of living a real and truer self. And you will understand who you are, why you are, and where you are.
Did you like today's show? If you did, ask yourself this question: who else might benefit from the information I just learned? All it takes to change someone's life is to share the link to today's show. Will you do that? When you leave a comment below today's post, you'll automatically be entered into a contest to win a copy of the book Mindfulness, an 8-week plan for finding peace in a frantic world by Mark Williams and Danny Penman. One person who leaves a meaningful comment will win a free copy of the book Mindfulness, shipped directly to their home or business. To keep getting daily inspiration and motivation, scroll down to the bottom of the page and enter your name and best email address to subscribe to The Daily Show, which airs 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. Most days, you'll hear from David Wood, my financial freedom mentor. 1 day a week, you'll hear from me. You'll also get several bonuses when you subscribe today, including a free MP3 version of my audio training, Relax. This 40-minute training will teach you how to harness the power of relaxation so that you can beat stress and live a life of peace. When you scroll down and subscribe to The Daily Show today, you'll also get a free PDF of today's message and an MP3 that you can listen to over and over again to reinforce the teachings in today's training. I look forward to seeing you again soon. My name is William Wood, and I believe in you.